So welcome everyone. I'm Loren Fisher and I've been a professional photographer since 1978. And I have to say nothing gets me more excited than a total solar eclipse. I've led workshops in Oregon in 2017 and Chile 2019 and tried to go in 2020 in Chile, but COVID wiped that out. But there are many things you can just pick up a camera and photograph and make some pretty good pictures, but an eclipse is not one of them. It takes a lot of planning and it also takes the right equipment, although it's not quite as much equipment as you might think. So let's just start with the basics. What a total solar eclipse is, and it happens when the moon blocks the sun's light from hitting part of the earth. So the moon is creating a shadow that moves across the globe. It actually creates two shadows. One's called a penumbra, and it's a wide one, and that's what you see when you're seeing a partial eclipse. And then there's the umbra, which is the totality, the total eclipse. And so that's it for our technical terms, kind of. So one of the big questions is, where can you see the eclipse? And with this one, you can see it anywhere in the US, but only totality along the color bar there. So the blue line in the middle of that bar is the point where the totality lasts the longest. That's where you want to be. And you'll see the partial eclipse outside of the lines. I can tell you that partial eclipse is nothing compared to totality. The first time I saw an eclipse, I remember quite well of standing out in the desert in Oregon and looking up, and during the partial phase, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool, but I don't quite get it. Then about 2 minutes before totality hit, the world changed, and I literally said, now I get it. And it's just a crazy experience. The light turns to a different color, nature gets confused, the world changes. It's pretty fun. So this map is done by eclipse2024.org, which kind of shows you where things are. But there's even a better one. And this guy is Xavier Jubier, and he is a maniac about eclipses. And he creates these interactive maps. And there's links in the chat box, or if you're watching the video, it'll be links in the notes down below. And this guy is just a eclipse nerd, and you'll see lots of info from him tonight and links to his websites. So with this map, you can point to any point on the map, and you'll get detailed info about the eclipse where you're pointing, and it's probably a lot more than you want. So here's a little closer view. It shows the duration of totality, and again, you want to be close to that center line as possible. And it shows the time, the start time for the partial, the altitude in degrees of the sun, so you know where it's going to be right in the sky, how far it is above the horizon. It shows the azimuth in the sun, which is degrees. So like due north is 0 degrees, due east is 90 degrees, etc. And so you can break out your compass and you can see in advance exactly where the sun will be. It also shows you just more technical stuff than most people can digest, but it's pretty darn cool, and you can move it around, and so of course there's an app to figure out where the sun's going to be. The best one is Photo Pills. It is an app that is not one that you just pick up and start using either. You need to watch their tutorials videos to be able to use it, but it will show you where the sun and the moon will be and the phases, and it doesn't really matter where you're standing. You know, it really doesn't matter where you are standing for the eclipse as long as you can see the sky. The eclipse is going to be midday, so it's going to be pretty much overhead. So as long as there's nothing blocking you, like a parking garage or trees or something like that, you're going to see it. So as long as the weather cooperates, you're not going to have any problem seeing it if you're in the zone. And speaking of the weather, If you want to read the most intense weather forecast you've ever seen, go to eclipsophile.com and /2024 TSE, TSE being total solar eclipse. And this guy, Jay Anderson, is the biggest weather geek I've ever seen. It'll take you about 15 minutes to read his entire forecast for that day. But if you want to know where to go, Jay Anderson's a man. So I live in Vermont, and I'm going to be about 40 miles, or my house is about 40 miles from where totality is. But I know the odds of a clear sky in Vermont on an April day are pretty slim. And Jay's chart shows that. So I'm going to Dallas, and I'm taking a pretty good sized group with me. The absolute best place weather-wise, according to Jay, is in Mexico out in the desert. But I'm not interested in going to Mexico. So I'm doing Dallas, where it's pretty dry too. But you can, the lower you are on his chart here, the drier it is. The less chance of cloud cover is what it really is. Interestingly, Jay says that Cleveland is a great place to be because of the wind coming off of Lake Erie and the way that all works. And so if you're in the Midwest, head towards Cleveland because it's going to be a pretty good spot. And I follow a group on Facebook of eclipse watchers, chasers, and they're pretty intense folks. And some of them have plane tickets that are refundable to 4 or 5 different cities, and they're going to pick where they're going that morning, wherever the weather forecast is looking the best, and go to the airport and walk outside the airport, watch the eclipse, and hop on the next plane back home. So if you think photo people are nuts, eclipse people are extremes. So there are 4 phases of the eclipse that you need to be familiar with. C1 or contact 1 is the start of the partial eclipse. And C2 is the start of totality. That's when it's totally covered. C3 is you're coming out of totality, the end of totality. And then C4 is the end of the partial eclipse and the eclipse is over. So if you'll see here in a few minutes why you want to know when C2 and C3 are occurring, because there are some phenomenons that you want to photograph that are pretty cool and last a very short time. So you have to know when that's going to happen. There are apps for that, which we'll cover in a little bit. But basically you have 77 minutes pretty much from C1 to C2. So from the start of the eclipse until totality, it's about 77 minutes. So as the moon starts moving in front of the sun, the fun begins. And at this point, you need to make sure you have certified eclipse glasses before looking at the sun, and also solar eclipse filters for your camera. We'll talk more about the filters in a minute. But you do not want to look at the sun without eclipse glasses on, and you don't want to aim your camera at it without a filter on. So very important. You know, it's funny, after the 2017 eclipse, there were several, I forgot the number now, people who checked into emergency rooms at hospitals because they'd put sunblock on their eyes to try to prevent problems with the eclipse, which I thought was pretty humorous. Anyway, so as the partial eclipse continues, one of the fun things you can do is just intertwine your fingers and let the sun filter through it. And the shadow that it casts on the ground will be crescent shaped, which is really weird. And if you really want to see it funky, get out and take a kitchen colander with you. And all the little dots that are there, they'll all be these funky little crescents. And it's really cool. If you're really high up, and you can see across the landscape, you'll actually see the moon shadow moving across the landscape, coming from the west. You'll see it coming across the ground. That's a pretty wild phenomenon, but you have to be in the right spot to see that. Really tough to photograph. Another thing that you'll see during partial, and especially as you're getting closer to totality, is there are just bands of shadows wavering on the ground. It doesn't always happen. It depends where you are. Don't know exactly why it happens when it does, but you'll just see these wavering bands of shadow on the ground, which are pretty darn cool. So as totality nears, the world changes. The wind tends to pick up. Birds and animals start acting funny and go quiet. The sky is dark overhead, but it is bright on the horizon, and the darkness takes on this unique color. It's nothing like you'll ever see at sunset. It's just really different. So when we're at this point, now is when you really need to get ready for a couple of great shots. So as the sun becomes a thin crescent, a little bit thinner than this, you can remove that solar filter from your camera. You don't need filters during totality. So a few seconds before totality, the diamond ring appears. And it is the last bit of sunlight sneaking around the moon before totality. And it only lasts a few seconds, so you need to shoot fast. But if you miss it, or Bailey's beads, which we'll talk about next, you have another shot at it at C3 as totality ends. But you want to try to shoot it going into totality, into C2, because I can tell you, you'll be so excited during totality that it's easy to miss these shots as it ends because you're going to be wound up. I'm just telling you. So right as totality begins, you'll see Bailey's beads if you don't blink. It is actually sunlight sneaking through the moon's valleys. And it too only lasts a few seconds. So again, shoot fast. And now it's getting darker. So, before I was shooting at about 1/2000th or 1/2000th of a second. Now I'm down to about 1/250th of a second. We'll talk about exposures here in a little while. But now's the time you need to get ready for screaming and crying if you're around other people, because people get nuts. So now we're in totality and all the filters are off. You can look at it directly, no problem. Depending where you're at, it lasts 4 minutes and 20 seconds or so. Again, depending where you're at. Downtown Dallas is going to be about 350. We're sacrificing 20 seconds for some great locations there. But if you're around people, they'll be yelling and applauding. When I was in Chile, the locals started singing their national anthem, just broke out into song. It can be very moving, I can tell you that. I cry every time. And depending where you are, you've got that 4 minutes and 20 seconds of totality to work with. And this is a pretty long one. The other ones I've been to are only a little over two minutes. So you want to get some photos right away, right? As soon as totality starts, get some shots, but be sure to plan on not making photos for at least 1 minute, if not 2 minutes during totality, just to take it in. Because I can guarantee you the photo in your mind and what you remember from it will be much better than anything you shoot with your camera. Okay. So there's a couple of different shots you can make during totality. One is a fairly tight shot showing the corona flaring out. It always looks different and it requires massive HDR. We'll be more on that in a minute, but it's multiple photos and you put them together in Photoshop, and it's a lot of work, but it's way cool. The other shot you can make is to have something in the foreground. So remember, the sun will be pretty much directly overhead, so you won't be able to get a horizon like this, like I did in Chile. This eclipse actually ended below the horizon. So I was up on a mountain and was able to get it with the mountain in view. So this shot was with a 100 millimeter lens. So you can see how small the sun is in that shot. Just the technical data, this is ISO 200 at f11 and a 2-second exposure. If you look closely, you can see my moon is an oblong as opposed to a circle because of the depth of field that I wanted there. So this is a shot I tried in Oregon at the bottom of the hill looking up. The sun was high in the sky for that one too. It was with a 24 millimeter lens to try to get some foreground, but it was so wide that the sun was so small in the picture, and I kind of overexposed it, so I couldn't even see the eclipse. So I suggest using at least an 80 millimeter lens, but you if you want something in the foreground, but you have to have some either tall mountains or tall buildings, because remember, the sun's pretty much overhead during this event. Another thing you can do is a composite of the different stages. Um, it's fun to see. I'm not a big fan. This one isn't mine. I grabbed it from a royalty-free site, so I didn't steal it. Um, but if you're going to make a composite, there's several ways of doing it. Some people will do it like this just to show the different phases. Some will do it as a line stretched out. But my suggestion is to either make it look like a composite or make it look real. I found this one online, and I'm stealing it, but I cut off his name. Don't do this and try to pass it off as real. This might be the worst one I've ever seen, because I cannot figure out how you get the sun in front of the clouds there on the left. But don't do that. So I've tried my own bad composites. This is the first time anybody's ever seen it. So you can tell the sun is mostly visible in this shot, which means there's lots of sunlight hitting the ground. So it would be bright out, right? Well, in this shot, it's dark. Plus, the foreground was shot with a wide angle lens, so the sun would be really small. This is terrible, which is why I'm showing you. So this is how to not make it look good. But we'll now talk about how to make it look good. So let's start with lenses and exposures. So again, the most important thing is you have to have a solar filter, and it is easy and safe to make your own. You need to have one for every lens that you will use. And as usual, any new equipment you have, be sure to practice several times before the eclipse day. You don't want to try to figure this out in 4 minutes or less, or 77 minutes before totality. You cannot use regular ND filters, even if you stack them. They just won't protect your sensor. So I make my own filters. This company, Bader Planetarium, is in Germany. You can get the filter material from them, and it looks like this. It comes in a package. A sheet is probably A4 size, a little bit different than 8.5 by 10 or 8 by 10, 8.5 by 11. And it has the filter material, and it has an instruction sheet on how to make your own holder. And if you have a filter holder for your lens, one that you've put either neutral density filters or whatever, a slide-in polarizer, you can make a little filter holder that slides into those. One of the Nisi holders or something like that. You just want to make sure you don't have wrinkles or holes in that filter, because that's a problem, right? And you have to be able to take it off quickly when we're at C2, when totality starts, and you have to put it back on quickly at C3. So right after you shoot Bailey's beads coming out of totality, you got to pop that filter right back on there. So you want to practice that ahead of time, taking it on, taking it off, or putting it on, taking it off. So you can order this from, I have the link for the website there. You get it directly from them. B&H has it, and I'm sure other camera stores also sell it. So I would suggest getting it soon, because last time a lot of places ran out, because they don't sell much other than eclipse times. So there is a guy who calls himself Mr. Eclipse. His name's Fred Espenak, and he is like the king of eclipse photography. And so here's a chart from his website, mreclipse.com, which shows the size of the sun with different lens lengths. So in the top left is a 200 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. It'd be a 135 millimeter on a crop sensor. But you can see how small the sun is in the frame with a 200 millimeter lens. 200, 400, 500, you can see the different sizes there. So you'll notice that when you get longer than 500 to 600 millimeters, you're going to be cropping out some corona if you're going for that corona shot, right? Because it flares out extremely wide. So if that's a shot you want, you don't need a lens longer than 500 or 600 in that range. But you may want to go longer if you're going for Bailey's beads or the diamond ring as your main shot. So you can see, with a 1500 millimeter lens, Bailey's beads are going to be looking pretty good. So, oops, there we go. So this is diamond ring I shot with a 400 millimeter lens with a 1.4 converter on it. So it gave me a 560 millimeter lens as equivalent, right? So this was shot at ISO 800 at f16 at 1/1000th of a second. And so I wanted f16 so I could get more flare from the edge of the sun, right? Works the same as if you're shooting street lights at night. If you like that flare look, you want to be up at f16. So that's why the ISO is so high on this shot. But this is also cropped quite a bit. And here's the full uncropped version. So you can see the sun itself is not very big in the frame. So that's something to consider on how much lens you want to use. And you might notice that in this shot, which was actually at C3 at the end of the eclipse, the sun is off to the side of the frame. It's not in the middle. And that's because that sucker is moving a lot faster than you think, right? So you have to keep moving your camera throughout the, especially the partial eclipse part, but during totality in 4 minutes, it's going to move out of your frame. So you can't just line it up and look away and click the button and think you're going to get it, because it's going to go out of your frame. So you have to make sure you keep moving your camera and following the sun as it's traversing the sky, right? So Fred Espenak is Mr. Eclipse. Is he is pure geek. I mean, he just has on his website is just scientific stuff beyond belief. But he came up with this pretty cool chart showing different ISOs and f-stops and shutter speeds and what you need at different points on of the eclipse. It is way overdone. So one of my suggestions for you is to make your own, right? So there is a even better site, which is Xavier Joubert interactive guide. And here you just put in your info, what lens you're using, what camera you're using, focal length, and ISO and aperture. And as you click on the different parts, he will tell you the shutter speed you should be using. So it is highly recommended that you shoot everything with the same ISO and the same aperture throughout the eclipse, and just change your shutter speed. Keep things simple, right? So you do not want to be messing around with this during the eclipse. So I suggest ahead of time, like days ahead of time, use it to create your own little cheat sheet, your own little guide that you can print and have with you. Put one on your phone and have a printed one. So during the eclipse, you can just pull that out and say, okay, this is my starting point for the exposure. It may be right, it may be off a little bit. You just want to bracket like hell and try all kinds of different sites or different exposures, right? Because you do have some time. But this is a pretty amazing little guide here. So if you do want this corona shot, which I think is mighty cool, you have to shoot multiple shots at different exposures, right? You need about 11 shots. So you'll go from about 1/1000th of a second down to 1 full second. And so I just thought I'd show you a quick run through of the shots I put together to get this one. So again, it was cropped a little bit afterwards, but as as I'm doing longer and longer exposures, you can see that the whole thing's looking funkier and funkier, right? So again, here's the final shot. And you'll notice I even got some nice prominences or solar flares coming off the edge of the sun. You don't always get those, but sometimes you do. So, you know, your exposure is pretty constant throughout totality. It changes immensely during the partial phases because it's getting darker out, right? So you need to be aware of what your exposure is doing. So here's some things to think about before the eclipse starts. Make that exposure cheat sheet, you know, and have it so you can quickly reference it. And you want to make sure that it has the estimated exposure for totality. The less you can think while you're doing this, the better off you are, right? So if you're shooting with a zoom lens, you know, one of the lenses I'm using is a 100 to 500, and I'll be shooting at 500. And so I'm going to zoom it out to 500 and then take some gaffer tape and tape it there. So as I'm pointing upwards, it doesn't rack back in and you know, you're all of a sudden I'm down to 100 and like, wait, what happened? Oh, I wasn't paying attention and it moved away on me. So gaffer's tape is going to be your buddy for this event. Make sure you're shooting manual focus. You want to focus before the eclipse starts on infinity. You want to focus on infinity, something extremely far away. And again, get out that tape and tape down your focus because the moon and the sun aren't going to change any the distance. So get on infinity, taper down. You also want to shoot manual exposure. Set your ISO for the day based on maybe the tests you've done the day or 2 days before or weeks before. And the same with your aperture, just set it and forget it. And you're only going to vary your shutter speed during the event, right? If you have image stabilization or vibration reduction on your lens or camera, turn that off. That can fight with your tripod. It might not, but turn it off to be safe. You'll want to have a good, steady tripod. This is almost 3-hour event, so you don't want to be hand holding your camera for 3 hours, or you'll be mighty tired and shaky, especially if you're using a long lens. So if you're traveling, make the effort to take your big tripod with you. Don't settle for that flimsy little travel tripod because you're going to have soft photos. You're going to have motion blur on it. And if you're going to use your phone to make some pictures of the event, make sure you have a solar filter for that too. A lot of people don't think about making sure I have a filter for my phone too. So just need a little piece and you just hold it in front of it. It doesn't have to be fancy. Okay, so during the eclipse, you want to have an audio countdown timer on your phone. So Solar Eclipse Timer by Foxwood Astronomy is a good one. And it will be shouting out 15 seconds till C2. And you'll know when Bailey's beads are coming up. And it'll tell you as you're coming back out of totality, you know, 10 seconds, 9, and count down the, you know, C3 is coming. Get ready to get your camera set for that. So about a minute or two before C2, which is totality, you can take off your solar filter. You still don't want to look at the sun with your eyes yet, but you can take off. It won't hurt your camera because it's pretty narrow light coming in. And then adjust your shutter speed and be ready for that second contact when Bailey's beads and diamond ring come in. The diamond ring, your exposure is a little brighter than Bailey's beads. You want to open up or slow down your shutter speed a little bit more for Bailey's beads, but they come and go fast. So you have to be ready for them. So have that filter off for those two events. So once we're in totality, take off your solar glasses and look around. take it in for a few seconds, right? Just, it's going to be very cool. Look at the sky, look at the horizon. You'll, if you're near other people, they'll be going nuts. It's fun. But then I suggest concentrate on shooting the corona if that's one of the shots you want. Run through your exposures, that whole sequence from short exposures to long ones, at that fixed f-stop. Do it backwards, do it again. I'm telling people to practice that in advance so they can run that sequence up and down in less than a minute. 30 seconds would be better, because you're shooting, your longest exposure will be 1 second or 2 seconds. So, if you can do that in 30 seconds, because remember, you have about 4 minutes for this whole thing. So once you run up and run down, then forget about the camera. Just forget about it. Don't make pictures the whole time. Take in the scene, take in the whole thing without the camera. Just trust me on that one, especially if you've never seen it before. And but reset your camera to the settings that you're going to want for C3, because it's going to happen very fast. You're going to be pretty pumped up from totality. So once you run through your sequence for the corona, reset your camera, get ready for C3, but just take it in until you hear that countdown timer saying, it's almost time for C3. So again, like I say, stop shooting, enjoy the show, right? So no matter how good your photos are, they're not going to do justice to the real thing. Just take that time. So once you get that, once you're out there watching it, dry off your eyes and watch your countdown timer. Be ready for Bailey's beads and the diamond ring. And as we go into C3, they're going to be on the opposite side of the moon. So if your sun, if your eclipse is moved in your frame, you might want to reframe your shot so the diamond ring pops out the bottom right. So as soon as the diamond ring becomes bright and the corona begins to fade, you gotta pop your solar filter back on your camera. Totality's over. You got to put your solar glasses back on to look up at the sky. If you're not looking at the sky, you don't have to have your glasses on, right? But only when you're looking at the sun, you need your goofy looking glasses on, right? So if you aren't extremely comfortable changing settings and handling your camera, my suggestion is just keep it simple. Plan on shooting with one camera. Highly recommend having a backup camera in case that one breaks at the last minute, but just plan on shooting with one camera. And you'll get some shots. You might not get every possible shot, but that's okay. The experience is going to be better than your photos. I'm just going to tell you that, right? I've been to several, so I'm going to be a little bit more complex. I'm going to be shooting with 5 cameras. My setup is I'm going to have a 400-2.8 with a 2x converter, which is going to give me an 800 millimeter lens for Bailey's beads and the diamond ring. Another 400, an f4 with a 1.4 converter. That one's going to be on a tracker, and it's just going to follow the sun as it goes through the phases. A 100 to 500 zoom for the city skyline. We're going to be in downtown Dallas, so we're going to have the city in the foreground and the eclipse in the background. And then I'm going to have a 70 to 200 on another camera with a remote shot. As part of our group, we're building a camera tree when we have a special spot where we have one of my cohorts is going to remotely fire a whole bunch of cameras at one time with this really cool lineup, and it's several blocks away from where our main shooting position is. And then I'm going to have another camera with a 24 to 105 and hand holding that for people shots during the event. Now I'm figuring at least 2 of these, maybe 3, and maybe 4 won't work. And that's okay. It's okay. My main camera is going to be that 100 to 500 with my main tripod, and that's going to get me the shots that I really want. If the others if I get the others, they're a bonus. If I don't, nothing lost. But that one camera is my main one. I know what photos I want to get with it, and that's what I'm going to get. Okay. So if you want to get more complicated, still make sure that you have a main camera that is going to get what you're really aiming for. If it's just one shot or whatever you're trying to do. So I mentioned timer or tracker. This is Skywatcher tracker, and so it'll track the sun. You can set it up, and so it will just follow the sun as it goes across the sky. So that one will have a 400 with a 1.4 on it. They're about $400. So depending on how bad you want the shot, or if you ever want to do star photos at night, they're great for that. Okay. So as part of getting more complicated, there's some software and apps you might want to work with. Photo Pills I mentioned earlier, and I also mentioned the solar eclipse timer from Foxwood Astronomy. They're both in the app stores, either Apple's or whatever the other one is. But I'm also going to use a camera control for automated imaging here. So I'm going to use Solar Eclipse Maestro for my Mac. So my laptop will be firing one camera. And so it will automatically fire the camera at certain points throughout the eclipse. So that's going to be on the one with the tracker. So as that one's going to be completely remote. If it works, it's wonderful. If it doesn't, well, it was fun trying. The Mac version is free. They don't make one for Windows. Another company makes Eclipse Orchestrator for Windows. It costs $109. So depending on what you want is what you get there. Okay, so some final thoughts. The most important thing is not to get so damn involved with your camera you don't experience the eclipse, okay? You really want to experience this eclipse because the next eclipse crossing the US isn't until 2045. And odds are I ain't gonna be alive by then. But if you're young, go for it. But you want to really experience this one. If you don't want to wait till 2045, you can always join me in Iceland in August of 2026. That's the next total solar eclipse, and it crosses Greenland and Iceland and Spain. It's going to cross my favorite part of Iceland, so that's where I'm going to be, even though it's kind of risky on the clouds there. Not as risky in Spain, but I'm going for it. So anyway, just make sure you wear your solar glasses. This is my group out in the desert in Oregon, and have proper filters and enjoy the day. That's the main thing. Okay. So anybody have any questions at this point? I got a question.
When you give the settings you use, is yours a full frame camera?
Yeah, yes. Exposure wise, that doesn't matter.
No,
but as far as, yeah, so that chart
for the lens,
that chart on lens length, it shows the difference between full frame and crop sensor. So the link in the chat will take you to that chart. Yes.
Hi, quick question. What are your thoughts on shooting on aperture priority and auto ISO?
No, don't do it. It'll get fooled. Shoot manual exposure. Got to go manual. You can't do any of those auto exposures or it'll get fooled. Okay. And you'll way overexpose things. Yeah, especially the auto ISO. Worst thing ever built.
Hi, you use ISO 800, you said, throughout?
Yeah, I did, yes. To maintain a fast shutter speed and to get that nice flare on the diamond ring. If your camera doesn't handle the noise at 800, then I'd drop it down to 400.
Okay, thank you.
So I see a question in the chat here of how many stops were each of your totality exposure sequences. for your composite image, 1 stop each. So going 1/1000th of a second, then 1/500, then 250, then 125, and down to all the way to 1 full second. I did some at 2 seconds too, but that was too much.
What was the color balance you said, sir?
That's a personal choice. So that is the only thing I put on auto, and then I'm shooting everything in RAW. Some of the Corona, I was actually getting up to around 6,200 degrees. And some of the others were down around 5,000. So you'll see Corona shots with all different colors of the background, because what color is it really? That's hard to say. You cannot process that HDR in Lightroom. It just won't work, or any of the regular HDR processing software. It just doesn't work. So there are several people who have come up with these really intricate ways of doing it in Photoshop. One of my favorite is from Adobe's Russell Preston Brown, and so there's links in there for that. He has 2 videos online, and it is a little bit intense with Photoshop, but he goes through the step-by-step pretty slow. And anybody who has Photoshop, if you just take your time and do the steps as he says, do the steps, you'll get some amazing results. But Lightroom, just not, you won't get anything. It'll say it can't do it. It'll just shut you down.
Did you do you recommend using an interval timer?
Yeah, you could use you could use an intervalometer as you're shooting, sure. But remember, you need to keep moving the camera, because unless you're shooting fairly wide, that sun's going to move out of your frame.
And how would you establish what your starting exposure should be? I mean, is your exposure going to change? Except I know it changes in totality, but is it going to change throughout the eclipse, or are you still just exposing for the sun?
It depends how you're shooting it. If you're shooting tight of the sun, it's not going to change much until you get down to the crescent being pretty small of the moon in front. If you're trying for landscape, you'll see it's getting darker and darker and darker in that 77 minutes from the start of the eclipse till totality. So it is constantly changing on the Earth. It's not constantly changing at the sky until it's getting pretty close to totality. Can you use a digital camera? Absolutely.
I had a question.
Everything's digital, yeah. Auto bracketing, can you use that? Absolutely. If your camera does a good job and you can tell it to set it up for 11 stops. So, you know, like I said, you want at least 11 shots, which would be 11 stops.
So Loren, I had a question.
Yes.
So I'm cinema based. I'm not so much still. And I was curious if you've used or had any experience with anamorphic lenses and how distortions may occur with the aura and flares around it.
I have not. I don't know that it would make much difference.
I figured it'd be so far on the outside of the image that it wouldn't be relevant.
Right.
But my hope is I'm actually to have a much higher magnification.
Yes.
And then have that distortion set on the outside so I can get greater landscape with a larger silhouette. Yes.
Fred Espinac on his site, I've seen he has some suggestions for video. I've not looked into that very.
Can you say the name one more time?
Fred Espinac, MrEclipse.com. Anything you want to know, go to MrEclipse.com, and he's got it in some of his little scientific, but he also has links to other people. So Mr. Eclipse has it all. See in the chat, somebody says they have an ND filter that's 16 stops. Can you use it for the eclipse? Nope, 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 nope. If it's not a solar eclipse or a solar filter, don't use it. It might seem dark enough, but it ain't.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It was. I bought it from B&H, and it was sold as a solar filter.
Then that's good. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I bought one from B&H and it's 16 stop neutral density. So I hope that's the right one.
If it says it's for solar, I mean, 16 is about what you want, 16 to 18, but some of them are just 16 stop ND filters and they're not solar filters, and there's a difference. So check it out. If it doesn't say solar filter on it, send it back and make your own for $10.
Yeah, B&H was selling Nisi filters that were solar eclipse 16 points. So if it was the Nisi one, B&H had the exclusive to it.
Then I'm sure that's good.
What I got. That's the one I got.
I would feel comfortable with that. Then yes. Yeah. So if you buy a screw-on filter, make sure you can take that baby on and off really quick. And if you're putting it on a zoom lens, you're not zooming your lens when you're pushing down on it to unscrew it. That's one of the, not only am I cheap, but one of the reasons to make your own is so it slides on and off really easy versus a screw-in filter.
Loren, to make our own, you said to use the Beta Planetarium supply kit.
Yes. Yeah, they have instructions in there. So in the photo that you're seeing, I'm the camera that's up the highest, that's one of mine. So you can just see it's just cardboard sandwiched, a piece of card or two pieces of cardboard with a hole in the middle and taped down to hold the filter material as flat as possible. So it's nothing fancy, but they work.
Lord, on B&H, they make for $20, it's cardboard, but it's semi-adjustable, so it fits a wide range of things, but it has the filter paper in it, and it says solar filter.
Yeah, who makes that? I haven't seen that.
That's for those of us that are not handy.
Well, you don't have to be real handy. You just have to use a pair of scissors to cut a hole in the, you
Yeah,
literally
it's actually
set your lens down on a piece of cardboard and draw a line around it and cut it out with a pair of scissors.
there's several, but I bought the Celestron one because I knew the name.
Cool.
It's $20.
Yeah, that's a good deal. Yeah, because some of them are $175, which, okay.
Steven, you said that's from B&H?
Yeah, just search for solar filters and work your way through the 300 down to the 400s until you get to the 20s.
I have kind of a simple question. My wife and I are just going out actually with one of the guys in your picture here who was with you last year. And our thought is just to keep it very, very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Not bring in tripod timers, any of that, just have a telephoto lens, hand hold during the, from the beads through the total and be done with it. I mean, would I be totally out of any goofy pictures doing a handheld like that?
Well, I'm a tripod fanatic, so I shoot absolutely everything I do with a tripod. I think it would be easier to carry a heavy tripod than to try to stand there with your camera and hand hold it for a little while. So, is it doable? Yes. Are you going to be able to do the Corona shot? No. Which is fine. Not everybody wants that shot. And so, no, you'll get stuff, especially during the partial phases. But it doesn't get pitch black out when totality hits. It's more like twilight. So, if you can go out at twilight after the sun goes down and hand hold some pictures, then you'll be able to get away with it. But you're better off with a tripod.
Yeah, well, as you said and he said, it's the experience more than the photos. You can always
Exactly.
get a picture online if you want the picture. And
Right.
I think I would enjoy it a lot more without setting up, wide lens and a telephoto and 2 tripods and timers and yada, yada, yada. I just wouldn't enjoy it.
Right. But if you just set up one tripod half hour before the whole eclipse starts, you've got 77 minutes until totality. So,
Okay.
you can get a little bit done.
All right. Thank you.
So, Lauren,
Yes.
maybe this is really stupid, but if I have the filter on my camera, do I need to wear the glasses to look at the LCD screen or through
No.
the viewfinder?
No, you never really need them to look at the LCD screen. Looking through the viewfinder without a filter is you're magnifying the sun, and you're really gonna wish you had. You might not ever see again. So, no, if you're looking at the screen, you don't have to worry about. It's like watching TV. But if you're looking through the viewfinder, that's when you want to be. If you have a filter on the camera, you don't have to worry about looking through the viewfinder without glasses on, without solar glasses on. Yes, you only need one.
With our mirrorless, we're using an electronic viewfinder, so that should be as safe as looking through an LCD, right?
Should be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But you still need to have that filter on to protect your sensor on your
right.
Your mirrorless.
Yeah.
I see.
And I did have one other question. Oh,
okay.
Sorry. So the other thing I'm attempting to capture, I know again it's a bit more video centric, so if it's not relevant, let me know. I will be hopefully having a drone flying on this, and I'm hoping to capture the shadow cast. Is that a defined enough line, or is that going to be something that is kind of a really gradient band?
It is a wide band. It will not be sharp at the edges. No.
Yeah.
You can Google photos of it and see it. And you can Google, there's videos of it coming across the landscape, and you can see how hard that would be. Drone wise, unless your drone shoots up, which most don't, it's not going to get you much. I would be concentrating more on a camera pointing up, even if it's video, than a drone pointing down. Okay, a question in the chat says, any special considerations for shooting in Rochester? Probably cloudier. If it's cloudy, you're done. All you're going to see is it getting darker out. You don't see the sun, which is why I'm not going to be in Vermont. I think Rochester, especially if you look at the chart that Jay Anderson put together, or if you use that, if you go to his website and read, you'll see why he tells why you don't want to be in certain places. And my guess would be, most days in April, Rochester has a pretty high chance of clouds, and clouds are the one things that are absolutely, we're done. Watch it get darker, but you're not going to see the sun.
Yeah. Do you use the lens shade?
I do, mainly to hold it's easier to on a telephoto to put the filter over a lens shade than not. But as far as protecting the lens from the sun, no, because you're aiming right at the sun, so it's not doing much of that.
Thank you for this. It was very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have fun out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Great photos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.